Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Federal Liberals elect Mark Carney to lead their party into the next election. Plus, an Ontario court dismisses a Freedom Convoy appeal in a multi-million-dollar nuisance lawsuit. And hundreds dressed in red and white descend on Parliament Hill to voice frustration with Donald Trump and his tariffs.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal Liberals elected Mark Carney to lead their party into the next election. His first ballot victory on Sunday makes him Justin Trudeau's successor and puts him on track to become Canada's next prime minister. Carney won with 85.9% of the vote. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland came in a distant second. Karina Gold came in third, and Frank Bialis came in last.
2 months ago, I put up my hand to run for leader because I felt we needed big changes. Change that puts more money in people's pockets. Change that makes our companies more competitive. Change that builds the strongest economy in the G7. There's someone who's trying to do the opposite. There's someone who's trying to weaken our economy. Donald Trump, as we know, has put, as the Prime Minister just said, unjustified tariffs on what we build, on what we sell, on how we make a living.
Carney wasn't the only one who fired shots at U.S. President Donald Trump, but in his farewell speech, outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the trade war between Canada and the U.S. an existential challenge.
These past 10 years have been challenging. Crisis after crisis has been thrown at Canadians. But through every crisis, Canadians have shown who they are. We've pulled together. We've stood up for each other, and every single time we've emerged even stronger. And now, as Canadians face from our neighbor an existential challenge, an economic crisis, Canadians are showing exactly what we are made of. Elbows up!
Now the focus turns to the transition plans, as Carney will need to be sworn in as Prime Minister. The exact timeline is unclear. Hundreds of people dressed in red and white descended on Parliament Hill to voice their frustration with President Donald Trump's on-again, off-again tariff threats and his comments to annex Canada. The Elbows Up Canada rally brought Canadians together, waving our country's flag, singing "O Canada," and even enjoying some stand-up comedy.
And when you're a young lad growing up in Canada, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, we had an older brother, didn't we? And it was named the United States of America. And he was our older brother, and we looked up to him back in the day. We did. He was a bit bigger and older and stronger, and he got invited to all the parties. He had way more money than us. But then back in November, our older brother got into a horrific motorcycle accident. Didn't he? And he's got massive head trauma. It's not the older brother that we used to know. Like, he's a different kind of older brother now.
And I've never felt prouder to be a Canadian than in this moment. What we've seen over the last couple of weeks is a real demonstration of Canadian pride, people pulling together, people shopping locally and buying Canadian, people wearing the maple leaf, putting flags out in the front of their homes. And I think it's a great moment for our country.
And speaking of rallies in Ottawa, the Ontario Court of Appeals has dismissed an appeal of Chris Barber, Tamara Leach, hundreds of protesters and donors in a $290 million class action lawsuit against the Freedom Convoy. The defendants asked the court to overturn the dismissal of an anti-SLAPP motion, which stands for Strategic Law Against Public Participation. The class action suit will continue to proceed. In 2022, thousands of Canadians from all parts of Canada drove to Ottawa to protest federal COVID vaccine mandates and lockdowns. In June of 2023, lawyers from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms launched the anti-SLAPP motion, but in February of 2024, Justice Caleb MacLeod dismissed the motion at the Superior Court of Ontario. A gondola cabin came crashing to the ground at around 9:20 this morning at Kicking Horse Mountain Resort, leaving passengers trapped. The resort, located in Golden, British Columbia, closed for the rest of the day and has not confirmed how many passengers were inside or whether anyone was injured. According to the resort's website, a fully loaded gondola cabin holds 8 people. The Alberta government announced today they will transfer emergency health services from Alberta Health Services to Acute Care Alberta. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says the move will allow the province to invest further in EMS, improve care and focus, and strengthen that component of the healthcare system.
So later this spring, emergency health services will come under the purview of Acute Care Alberta. And as we all know, EMS, or emergency medical services, are the backbone of our healthcare system. Whether it's responding to an accident or a medical emergency in our homes, paramedics are often the first line of care and treatment. So these changes will allow emergency health services to focus on improving efficiency, patient safety, and response times in all parts of the province.
This change is part of the province's plan to refocus healthcare by splitting Alberta's healthcare system into 4 separate agencies. Recovery Alberta and Primary Care Alberta are each fully operational. Acute Care Alberta is set to be operational by April the 1st. Economic Development Lethbridge says it will receive over $400,000 from Prairies Economic Development Canada to invest towards developing the local supply chain. EDL is just one beneficiary from Prairies Can's larger announcement of $1.8 million of funding towards various projects to enhance Alberta's agriculture sector to new markets and advanced and innovative technologies. Trevor Lewington of EDL says this funding will help develop the supply chain and logistics sector along the Highway 4 region, and the municipal partners in the area will match that amount to bring it to over $800,000.
So over the next 3 years, we're going to be very focused on developing the logistics, transportation, and warehousing sector, which of course is critical to the success of all industries and all sectors across the Lethbridge region. Yes, the United States will continue to be our closest and largest market. It will still be a focus. However, if we develop a more robust environment for, again, logistics, warehousing, transportation, that helps all industries. And in fact, now it's arguably more important than ever as we look to expand other markets. We need all of that infrastructure. We need those businesses to be able to get our goods to market.
Lewington adds that the COVID-19 pandemic underscored how vulnerable supply chains are in our region and welcomes any opportunity to further expand robust infrastructure to ship products through. Well, fire crews in Lethbridge say they responded to a residential fire just after midnight on Sunday. Crews from 4 stations responded to the property at 44 Trent Road West under heavy fire conditions, which took them 3 hours to fully extinguish. The damage is estimated at around $390,000, but no injuries were reported. Lethbridge Fire and Emergency Services wants to remind residents to use working smoke alarms and ensure you have a home escape plan. Well, every day, 11 Canadians are diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a little known and so far incurable blood cancer. Sadly, this number is increasing. Myeloma is the 2nd most common form of blood cancer. In honor of Myeloma Awareness Month, which began today, the city held a flag-raising ceremony outside City Hall. Brian Treadwell is the Lethbridge Myeloma Support Group leader and also battles multiple myeloma.
It's where the good blood cells are crowded out by the bad blood cells. It gets into our bones, and we become very sick. They should go to their family physician for anything they feel is off. A bone pain, maybe they feel tired all the time, maybe they have kidney problems. It is quite treatable. You get a chance to be into drugs, or you might have a stem cell transplant. We are lucky in Alberta, probably the best province in Canada, because there's lots of drug trials going on right now, especially up in Calgary, that is looking to win the battle against multiple myeloma. There's hope, and that's the best thing that we can offer people with multiple myeloma is hope.
Hear more about Treadwell's journey of battling myeloma in an interview with BCN's Naveen coming up later on in our program. You can also find more up-to-date information by visiting myeloma.ca. The city of Lethbridge will be hosting its first ever summer job fair, aligning with recent job openings offered to the community. Since 10 a.m. this Tuesday at the Cavendish Farm Center, departments hiring include the city's water and wastewater operations, transportation operations, and parks and cemetery operations teams. Gabby Williams, organizational effectiveness manager, says the city will offer between 80 to 100 positions. Williams outlines the requirements to apply.
You do need your grade 12, and so that is one of the job requirements, and you also need a driver's abstract, 5 years, 5 demerits or less, and so if you do have those requirements, we welcome you to come. This is a great foot in the door kind of position or positions. You can come on. The city hires from A to Z in terms of jobs, right? So when you think of what a municipality offers for the community, there's just so many services that are there. And so you can come on if you have an interest in a different area. So there's transit, or you have an interest in engineering or billing or whatever it might be. This is a great foot in the door. You come in, you can move around.
We like to put ourselves out there, community engagement, maybe have some people come by, see this as a potential career for them in the future. So it benefits people who may see this as a career down the road, and it benefits the fire department because many people don't know what we do, and it's a way for us to talk to people and say, this is what the fire department can do, what do you want from your fire department and ambulance, and so we get feedback as well. Well, first we're looking to make sure they're qualified, so primary care paramedic, advanced care paramedic. If you're interested in fire, that's a huge benefit, but we don't need that certificate right now. People who are big into teamwork, just looking to help people.
In addition to the in-person process, you can also apply via online at lethbridge.ca/careers. Well, on Friday, BCN reported that a notable protester at the Coutts border blockade was sentenced at the Lethbridge courthouse. Alex Van Herk, who was convicted of mischief for his role in the Coutts border blockade, was given a 90-day conditional sentence to be served in the community. Van Herk will be required to perform 100 hours of community service and be on 12 months of probation. He will be required to look into serving the towns of Milk River and Coutts to fulfill his community service hours and will not be permitted to interact with fellow co-accused Marco Van Hugenbos or George Jansen during that 90-day period. Justice Keith Yamauchi says Van Herk is well on the way to rehabilitation and he's recognized the wrong he has committed. Van Herk issued a statement of apology to the court and community on his role at the blockade, but also says he does not regret standing up for what he believes is right.
It's sad that people had to use these kind of means to be heard for the government overreach that was happening, and it's sad that people had to go to Ottawa and to Coutts to be heard, right? So I think not regret, but I know in the future people better get involved in their political life, and because we need to make change in our political leaders, and the only way we're going to get change is if people stand up against them.
Well, the town of Coaldale recently announced the reopening of its rain barrel rebate program. It provides residents with a 50% rebate on the purchase of a rain barrel up to a maximum of $50 per barrel. Coaldale Mayor Jack Van Ryan says the rebate program helps residents be more responsible with water management amid drought-like conditions like what southern Alberta experienced last year. The program allows a limit of 1 barrel per residence, and only rain barrels purchased after January 1st are eligible for the rebate. The program will remain open until October the 1st or until a designated fund of $15,000 has been depleted. Coaldale residents with a proof of purchase can apply for the rebate online by visiting the Town of Coaldale's website or in person at the town office. Rebates will be issued as a credit on residential utility bills. In sports, Alberta's Brad Jacobs beat Manitoba's Matt Dunstan 5-3 to win the Montana's Brier. Jacobs made a game-winning pick for 3 points to win the Canadian Men's Curling Championship for the first time since 2013.
All the credit goes to my guys. I couldn't be more proud of them. I play for them, and it was so great to share in that celebration with my guys and see how thrilled they were to get this win today.
And a big congratulations to Jacobs and his team there. Well, turning our eyes overseas now, an update on Pope Francis. As we learn, he is no longer in imminent danger from pneumonia, but doctors in Rome are keeping him hospitalized. Doctors say the 88-year-old Pope remains stable and has shown improvements in recent days. The Vatican says the doctors lifted their previous guarded prognosis, but his medical drug therapy requires him to be in hospital for more time. Francis was hospitalized last month with what was just a bad case of bronchitis that developed into double pneumonia. And for some Hollywood news, actor Gene Hackman's autopsy is shedding some light on his final hours and week by offering telling details about his condition. And it would appear it was a horrible string of events leading to both his wife and his death.
The cause of death for Mr. Gene Hackman, aged 95 years, is hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease as a significant contributory factor. The cause of death for Miss Betsy Hackman, aged 65 years, is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The manner of death is natural. Mr. Hackman's initial pacemaker data revealed cardiac activity on February 17th. With subsequent pacemaker interrogation demonstrating an abnormal rhythm of atrial fibrillation on February 18th.
While Hackman died of Alzheimer's, officials estimate that Hackman's wife, Betsy, died before him around February 11th. Hantavirus, which was the cause of her death, is a respiratory illness transmitted by exposure to rodent excrement. She was her husband's primary care provider. Their bodies were not discovered until February 26, along with one of their dogs who was found in its kennel. The canine's cause of death is speculated to be starvation and dehydration. That is such a horribly sad news for that family. Well, we do need to take a quick break here, but I'll be right back with your weather forecast. Well, we woke up to a little blanket of snow this morning. Some of us a little bit surprised by it, especially after those double-digit temperatures over the weekend. But holy cow, was it ever windy. Today, on Monday, we saw more like a 50-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts, and much the same on a Tuesday there, along with we're getting back into those double digits by Tuesday as well. High of 10 degrees into Wednesday. We're going to climb up to 12 with a mix of sun and cloud. Back to 9 on Thursday with mainly sunny skies that day. Friday, a mix of sun and cloud, but only reaching that high of 0. And then Friday night, we're going to see a 30% chance of flurries. Saturday, mainly overcast skies, high of -3. So we're going to get back into those minuses again for the weekend. And then Saturday evening, we could see 30% chance of flurries before Sunday, 60% a chance of flurries. So there you go, -2 for that high on Sunday. I'm betting that the skiers and snowboarders are still loving it, but when you're just ready for spring to be here and then on to summer, you know, it's enough with the snow already. So average high for this time of year, 5 degrees, average low -7. 19 was the record high on this day back in 2015. Not that long ago, 2015, 10 years ago, we reached that record high of 19. And back in 1951, -35 was the record low on this day. So sun rose this morning at 7:56. That looks funny because we just saw that time change there. We skipped ahead for daylight savings. So 7:56 was the sun rose. Sunset this evening at 7:28. So we're looking at, 11 hours, 32 minutes of daylight. So 10 minutes longer than we saw on Friday. Did you notice how much darker it felt this morning though when we got up because of that time change? But the nice thing is we're going to see that evening sunshine is so much longer. Periods of rain tomorrow in Victoria, high of 7 degrees. Periods of rain as well in Vancouver. In the higher terrain though, we're going to see some snow over those areas. 6 degrees for the high there in Vancouver. 4 expected to be the high in Edmonton tomorrow, and a high of 9 degrees in Calgary with mainly sunny skies there. As we get into the rest of the prairies here, -1 for the high in Saskatoon. Regina sitting at -2 tomorrow, but 30% chance of flurries. Now, Winnipeg, after snowfall and blowing snow and freezing rain today, on Tuesday, we're going to see mainly sunny skies. High of -5 though. Also risk of frostbite there in Winnipeg because still seeing that -29 wind chill, particularly in the morning. Now, as we look into the central part of the country here, 12 degrees expected in Toronto with increasing clouds. Ottawa looking at starting out sunny, increasing clouds by the afternoon. By late afternoon, we're seeing 70% chance of showers there, high of 10 degrees, high of 9 in Montreal, also expecting some late day showers there as well. As we get into the Maritimes, Fredericton, high of 8 degrees, mix of sun and cloud, and Halifax, sunshine, 6 degrees. Both of those cities seeing wind gusts up to 20 to 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. High of 5 degrees tomorrow in Charlottetown with clear skies and 30 to 50K winds. 30 to 50K winds also expected tomorrow in St. John's with a -2 for the expected high and a mix of sun and cloud. So there you have it. That is your forecast. American tariffs on Canadian dairy and lumber may not arrive until next month, according to interviews U.S. President Donald Trump and his top commerce official gave to media outlets over the weekend. Trump threatened Friday to hit Canadian lumber and dairy with reciprocal tariffs within days, but U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said on NBC on Sunday that the tariffs on Canada's dairy and lumber will wait until April 2nd. The Bank of Canada will make an interest rate decision this week as it tries to navigate the ever-shifting trade dispute with the United States. The central bank cut its benchmark interest rate 6 times in a row as inflation cooled and the economy showed signs of life at the end of 2024. But the tariff battle launched last week when the U.S. changed the conversation around Canada's economy. Financial markets are expecting the central bank to cut rates by a quarter point to 2.7% on Wednesday. Well, truckers are scrambling for new routes as tariffs bring shipments to a halt. Trucking companies are already facing a big lull in shipments for everything from seafood to potatoes, with many orders on pause. The Canadian Trucking Alliance says customers have been canceling orders, and many fleets surveyed in Ontario by the industry group reported recent or imminent job cuts. Stats Canada says shipments by road accounted for 52% of the country's import value in 2023 and 40% of its exports. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 378 points on the day to finish at 24,380. The Dow was down 890 points to 41,911. The S&P 500 was down 155 to 5614, and the Nasdaq was down 727 points to finish at 17,468. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.13 to $65.90 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 6 cents to $4.46 U.S. Gold was down $22.48 to $28.8913 US an ounce, and silver was down 40 cents to $32.11 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley is at $6.60, canola is at $13.70, and corn is at $8.05 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was up 30 cents to $200.58. Feeder cattle were up 8 cents to $277.05. Lean hogs April contract was up 95 cents to $88.30, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $69.30 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Mark Carney was elected on Sunday as leader of the Liberal Party and as the next Prime Minister. He won with 85.9% of the votes, a larger margin than expected. Now the focus turns to the transition plans, as Carney will need to be sworn in as Prime Minister. The exact timeline, however, is unclear. Coming up after the break, foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joins us to discuss Trump tariffs, potential troubles between the U.S. president and new Liberal leader Mark Carney, and much, much more. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also check out our website or our YouTube page anytime for more of our stories and interviews.
There is lots happening this week on the political front around the globe, and joining us now is Lisa Daftari, our U.S. correspondent from the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, what's the response from the White House to Mark Carney winning the Liberal leadership race here in Canada and essentially becoming, in one sense, an unelected next Prime Minister of Canada?
You know, the White House and Trump's administration is ready to use whatever strategy they'll use against anyone. So I don't think it's deterring them whatsoever, but it would help if there was somebody who was more of an ally of Trump or the United States that would be able to work better with him, that would be able to not be as combative coming in. This guy is completely anti-Trump. He's been very vocal about being anti-Trump, and he's ready to go to war over the tariffs, not literal war, but definitely putting up a strong fight against the White House's positioning. Trudeau was the the guy we knew, and now this is the guy we don't know, but already coming in, somebody who obviously is opposed to Trump himself as well as his policies. And I want to add, we talk about the policy of tariffs, but meant really hopefully in the long run to be more of a constructive approach to getting along with our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. And in the long run, there will be growing pains, and it seems like that's where we're at right now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, he's not a Trump fan. But then again, Trump's not also, he's not a fan of Pierre Poilievre either. So we'll find out what happens in our next election here. But of course, he's much more conservative leaning than Carney is. He's fairly left of center, just like Trudeau. So any updates on that tariff situation? I mean, last I heard, any goods under the USMCA agreement will have a tariff pause until April 2nd. But the rest of the goods, the exports still being taxed, that's about 60% of them overall, I think. So, and Trump, of course, also being asked if he's worried about those tariffs causing a recession in the U.S.
Yeah, it's crazy to watch how the markets are responding. They're totally erratic based on these different, kind of push and pull with the White House's statements. There are tariffs, and then we see the markets tank, and then kind of pausing or kind of qualifying the tariffs and kind of giving Mexico and Canada a bit of a break on certain things, as you outlined. It's interesting because, again, it does show one thing. It shows deterrence in the sense that Donald Trump is using the tariffs as a political tool, and the world is responding in that way. So this does mean that he has the potential to, again, work well with our neighbors, as long as the tariffs are only used as that leveraging tool and not a long-term strategy or anything that will escalate. But that's the problem with Donald Trump. We just don't know what's going to escalate and what's going to work. But there's definitely a method to his madness. I know a lot of the people in his cabinet. I've interviewed many of them over the years as well. But they are confident that this is more of a leveraging tool to get to where the United States wants to be in terms of of deterrence. A lot of work to be done after the last administration in terms of building back the U.S. position, building back that deterrence, and dealing with our friends and enemies in very different ways that has been in the last 4 years. So this is just reestablishing the new sheriff in town, and unfortunately, the tariffs are part of that.
Yeah, it'll. I mean, I'm hearing, you know, Trump and others in the administration saying countries like Mexico and Canada and others around the world need to show a little more respect for him. So that's a big thing, I think, for Trump. So I don't know, maybe we need to send him some great Canadian coffee or something. I don't know, but
I would love some great Canadian coffee. So if anybody wants to send my way, I would love that too. But you know, it's interesting. I get in the craziest way. I do understand what Vance and Trump say when they repeat this concept of respect. The United States has lost its positioning. It's lost its leadership. It's lost its clout globally. And while I wouldn't, you know, demand respect, you have to show respect to get respect. And I think that there's a collaborative, you know, way to do that politically. The Trump way in this arena has been to demand that respect through these political actions and through the leverage that he will use to get that respect. So, you know, it has worked. He's only been in office about 2 months, and I think it's interesting how many things he has been able to overturn and to get to go, you know, the American way, and to reestablish that leadership on the world stage. But you know, the only thing that I would caution, only as an observer, is that there's no one size fits all way to deal with these countries. There's no, you know, you can't use the art of the deal in every single situation. All very nuanced. They're all very different. But I do think that he has very smart people surrounding him. He himself being, you know, obviously the master negotiator. And I think there's others around him, generals and others who are well versed in defense and national security that can help him, and the economics, of course, and that could help really guide him to a place where we could use both, where we could demand that respect and, you know, use political leverage to, you know, reestablish that deterrence, but at the same time, you know, use the facts that we have to gauge each situation with its nuances.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, when you look at leaders around the world, presidents, prime ministers, and so forth, there's lots of ego there, I think, in all of them. It kind of comes with the territory, right? So I think it would be great to see, you know, kind of across the board, a little more humility, a little more respect both ways. And man, I'm hoping that'll happen, praying that'll happen. Now, the EU, the European Union, held an emergency summit this last week on defense spending in response to Trump telling them that, hey, you know what, you guys need to start growing up and defend yourselves and spend some money. So interesting, they are, looks like, going to up their defense spending budgets. And big picture, I think that's probably a good thing.
We were just talking about, you know, what Trump does and how it brings about positive results. And here's a great example of that. It's funny that they called an emergency meeting because this idea had been floated around when Trump was a candidate. And the Europeans knew that this is a position that Trump feels very strongly about. Even before Trump ran the first time, I remember him going on, you know, Sunday morning news shows, you know, in the 90s and the 2000s, and talking about how the United States has to demand that our global partners pull their share, that we're not overly paying to the UN and to NATO and to all the other acronymed organizations, that they're pulling their weight to in ratio to their ability to pay. And the Europeans knew that, you know, if Trump is elected, this is what's going to happen. And the fact that they're calling an emergency session, it's, I think, more for the optics to say, oh my gosh, we're scrambling, but we're going to fill it out. We're going to figure it out. And they did, right? So look, this is all good. If everyone becomes stronger as a result of the United States' strength, it's wonderful, right? That's really what he's hoping for. Ronald Reagan did it before him, and now Trump doing it for the second time.
Well, so that's one thing. You know, people know who's in charge. Trump's in charge, right? There's no doubt. So they need to pay attention to, you know, when he makes these promises. You know, sometimes he follows through on them as well. So and you see that response again from countries in Europe. So there's also a pause been put on, of course, United States intelligence for Ukraine. But Trump's saying he's lifted most of that now, and he believes they're still going to sign that minerals deal with Zelensky, and possibly even in a few days. So I don't know if we're going to see more of these same kind of fireworks this week, but any news on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, the way that he's able to hit the button and then hit pause and then, see things move the needle the way that he had hoped because of those measures. The Ukraine issue, and again, this is not to be pro-Russia or anti-Ukraine at all. We're just looking at the facts. What's the best way out of this for everyone involved? And the minerals deal actually does something twofold. And I was listening to Newt Gingrich on this, and he really opened up my eyes to the fact that the minerals deal not only creates a physical barrier, because now you have Russia minerals by the United States and then Ukraine, on this side. So you create this buffer. So there's like a physical defense there now, and the Russians will think twice when there's American forces on the ground. They're not boots on the ground. They are there for this deal only, and also it will, resolve the issue of the economic need for more aid and more resources and nation building and all of that. So it actually is a brilliant idea if it works out. So in theory, it is a brilliant idea. I think it solves a lot of issues in one strategic move. And the message to both the Russians and the Ukrainians is that we want this war to end, A, and B, we want it to end as soon as possible with the least amount of damage to both sides. And look, we can't reverse what Russia has captured in Ukraine, and we don't want the Ukrainians to lose statehood, and we don't want World War III to break out. I think Trump was very clear about those bullet points, and that being the agenda. So here we are. We'll see how Zelensky behaves, how he reacts. Again, he went away from the White House being very apologetic about his behavior. I think the reaction back at home was, what the heck were you doing? You're on the global stage and acting like a child and not dressed appropriately and not showing respect to a world leader who is trying to help. And again, I'm not saying that what he was offered was the best. There's a different way to handle a diplomatic conversation when you are at that level of a meeting.
Yeah, I think they all dropped the ball on that one. It was a little embarrassing to watch for sure, try to explain this to my kids. These are the world leaders, okay, we're dealing with here.
Usually these conversations shouldn't happen in front of cameras.
No, for sure.
But Trump's brand is to show that. And for better or worse, we all saw it.
Yeah, we did. All right. Any updates on the Middle East here? Syria, stuff happening there? Yeah, some serious clashes along the coastlands there. Basically, some leftover loyalists, I guess, from Assad, who's now, of course, in Russia, I guess, and the new Islamist rulers under Ahmed Shara. I think over 1,000 people killed, right?
More than 1,000. I think we're looking at 1,200 to 1,300 casualties as of this morning, mostly civilians and mostly Christians and Alawites being a sect of Islam that Assad belonged to, actually. So these are the coastal enclaves inside Syria. It's crazy that the media has been so late to report on this. A lot of people have compared it to Gaza. Why doesn't this deserve that kind of global attention? But here we are. This is what the news picks and chooses. And if there's Israel's not the culprit or the Palestinians aren't the victims, then you don't hear about it. But there are 1,000 to 1,300 casualties, all of them being civilians, and many of them losing their lives solely because they are in these communities where they believe that they are Assad supporters. They just want to do away with this problem of having Assad, people who are loyal to Assad inside the country, and it is horrific. Why would we ever believe that a terror group could lead a country and do it in a way that is, beneficial and give them political clout and so forth? And now that same leader of this HTS group has vowed to investigate. I mean, it's crazy. You're asking them to investigate themselves. So I think the whole Syria situation, we know that Assad's regime crumbled, and we know that he fled, but it's basically been on hold. We've been ignoring it because we want to figure out what happens between Israelis and Palestinians first, but this is directly correlated to that. If we allow terrorists in Syria, if we allow the terror routes to continue, there will be more funding for Hezbollah and Hamas, and this will all continue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how we could possibly trust somebody who's been a terrorist for a long time and suddenly, switches colors and, the leopard loses his spots, right? Ain't going to happen, I don't think. So in the Middle East there, in Israel, Hamas, Gaza, Hamas has, I guess, agreed to extend that ceasefire for a couple of months and says they'll release additional living hostages. And there's an American hostage of particular interest right now as well, right?
Yeah, the United States trying to negotiate directly with Hamas in order to really negotiate the release of this one American hostage at the very least. Obviously, we want to get as many hostages out as possible. These are civilians. These are mostly, young people who lost their lives, or the elderly who were dragged from their homes early in the morning in their pajamas. And there's also dead bodies. I'm very close with a family here in Los Angeles. The uncle was 80-something years old, and he was killed while being held hostage, and they still have not had a proper burial for him. They haven't gotten his body back. So these are also stories that we don't hear about this horrific situation, but it's trickle, trickle, trickle. And it's what's very difficult for the Israeli position is that obviously their priority is to get the hostages back alive, and what they can do to get them back alive, maybe a few dozen left alive, also the dead bodies. But when Donald Trump makes these ultimatums and these statements of all hell will break loose, Israel cannot go in and do what it needs to do in Gaza because there may be hostages that are alive and being kept underground or in homes, etc. So they're really stuck in this position. And on the Hamas position, it's trickle, 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 trickle. For every one hostage, they're getting back 50, 60, 100, prisoners and terrorists. These are actual terrorists, people who, we see these anecdotes online, so and so, he killed my brother and uncle and whoever else, and now he's going to be loose on the streets. So it's a very, very horrific situation. And,
injustice. I mean, it really, really is. I'm glad to see that the Trump administration withholding $400 million in funding from Columbia University because of the anti-Semitism going on there. And of course, ICE officers also arresting one of the anti-Israeli protesters at that university. So I was encouraged to see some of that taking place.
Yes, absolutely. And they're making an example out of Columbia University, and maybe next they'll move over to UCLA or many of the other colleges where these protests continued. Just at Columbia over the last month, they took over the library, they called in a bomb threat, they marched into a classroom and harassed students that were taking an Israeli history course, handing out flyers, wearing masks and dressed as, militant. Horrific. They took over another building in the school where even the chancellor of the school couldn't get through. And nothing has been done. I think, they have intimidated, so many of the teachers and who maybe they're useful idiots. I'm not saying that the teachers are innocent or they're just scared. They perhaps are on the sides of these students who are advocating for terrorism, who are advocating for the killing of Israelis. It's mind-boggling to watch an institution of this caliber, espousing these viewpoints. And I'm very happy that Trump did this, both the deporting of the students and the money.
Yeah, bring the hammer down as far as I'm concerned. I mean, this needs to stop. Yeah, it needs to stop. I mean, it's just, yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for the update today, Lisa. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
March is Multiple Myeloma Awareness Month, and today we're going to learn more about this type of cancer and what kinds of treatments and supports are available. Our guest has battled myeloma himself and is the head of the Lethbridge Myeloma Support Group. He joins us here in the windy city of Lethbridge. Brian Treadwell, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Nav. Thanks for inviting me to Bridge City News.
Great to have you on. So, Brian, can you explain to our viewers what myeloma is and how Canadians are battling this disease?
Okay, first of all, let's answer the second question first. Though classified as a rare disease, myeloma is the second most common form of blood cancer. In 2022, nearly 4,000 Canadians were diagnosed with myeloma, and currently 11 Canadians are diagnosed every day with the disease.
Wow.
Yeah. So as far as myeloma itself, and here's the medical part, and I don't want to get too medical on it, but it's a blood cancer associated with the abnormal behavior of uncontrolled growth of plasma cells. That's the white blood cell. Plasma cells are made in the spongy part of your bone, and they're an important part of your immune system because they produce the antibodies. Okay, and in myeloma, too many plasma cells are produced and they crowd out the good cells like red blood cells and platelets that our body needs to keep us healthy. And when you have numerous areas in your body affected by these growth, the disease is called multiple myeloma.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And so, what are the symptoms of myeloma then?
Okay, some of the common primary symptoms are bone pain, anemia, extreme fatigue, reoccurring infections, and kidney problems. However, anything unexplained should be referred to your doctor so he or she can refer you on to a hematologist. And those people are the ones that make the specific diagnosis.
And is there a known cure?
No, currently it's incurable. However, great strides are being made in increasing both the quality and quantity of survivability of diagnosed patients. A decade ago, the survivability was about 5 years, but now with research and new drugs and treatments, people are living 5, 10, 15, 20 years and longer past their initial diagnosis. So
Wow,
that's the good news.
that is some good news. And what kinds of treatments are available, and which kinds of treatments seem to be having the most success?
Okay, because myeloma is, well, I'd call it a designer disease. It designs itself around you. Your medical team will decide what's the best treatment for you. It's all depending on your age and your other health factors. You may have a stem cell transplant or not. I had a stem cell transplant, and since I had a stem cell transplant, even the protocol has changed for treatment then. So treatment is always changing for the better because they find all sorts of new things, new ways of treating it. So it's an ongoing process. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to be.
Well, I mean, so you're a myeloma survivor yourself. So can you just tell us what life with myeloma is like?
Well, as far as treatments go, what are having the most success? Well, stem cell transplants, CAR T therapies. Um, your doctor sort of gives you a designated treatment plan to put the cancer cells into remission. And that's the best possible way because it's incurable. The best place to get is to have it go into remission. And therapies evolve. Treatment works for a period of time that you're in remission. But then cancer, it's smart. It adjusts itself to those drugs and it says, okay, I'm used to it, so now I'm going to grow again. So then you become what they call relapsed. So the doctors have to go and find a new drug to go on and put you on. And you go on that for a while and go back into remission. And then the drug gets smart again, and or the cancer gets smart again and says, okay, I like this. I'm going to grow again. So this dance goes on and on and on until you get back in and you run out of known drugs and you're put into what they call refractory because you're at the end of the line. So what happens then is your team has to look for drug trials, which aren't approved, by Health Canada. It's not a known, produced, but it's done at universities and specific things like that. So you hope to get on drug trials. And a lot of people are on them and their survivability is increasing again. So it's an interesting dance. Here in Alberta, the University of Calgary has world-class researchers, and they're coming up with some great new drugs. And I have one lady in our group that's been on there for about 5 years with a trial drug, and she was initially on palliative care, and she's gone to just blossoming on this trial drug.
Wow,
She's
amazing.
doing really well. So that's giving some great hope.
And going back to living with myeloma,
Mm.
in your experience, was there pain, discomfort?
Well, for me, yours truly, I have anemia, which gives low hemoglobin. So always being tired, and that's no fun. Of late, I've been dealing with having to going for blood transfusions, and so it's an interesting dance. I had a stem cell transplant in 2021, and there's a whole battery of tests that lead up to going through that. And your doctor has to decide whether you're a good candidate for having a stem cell transplant. It's based on age and your health factors again. Now they're treating based on that whether you have a stem cell transplant or whether you don't, and your drugs that you take um, are adjusted specifically for that. So as far as day-to-day life, uh, there's good days, there's bad days, there's in between days. So you just, as Christy Lane sang, one day at a time.
One day at a time.
Yeah.
Now, do we know anything about what causes myeloma?
That's a good question. Everybody asks what causes it. We really don't know. We really don't know. Some say the environment, others say it could be pesticides. We're not really sure. No, the cure, that's what we're after.
Absolutely. Now, are there any ethnicities or age demographics who are more susceptible to getting myeloma?
Well, the median age for diagnosis is 65, though I've heard as young as 35. Primarily, it's 70s and 80s that get diagnosed. And there's more of a prevalence for Asian and Afro American heritage. So it can be anybody. Let's face it, it can be anybody.
And I want to go back to your experience. When you were diagnosed with myeloma, what was your reaction and how has your journey been battling this disease?
Well, it's funny. I have to give credit to my family physician. He was tired of seeing me complaining about always being tired. So he finally said, I've got to send you to Dr. Benke. And my hematologist set me up to Calgary with a battery of tests. And I went back to see him for the diagnosis. And he came in and sat down beside me and took a deep breath and said, you have multiple myeloma. So I just went, okay, so what do we do next? That's the thing. I wasn't no woes me, whatever.
It just didn't phase you. You were just like, okay, how do we tackle this? How do we get this?
Exactly. How do we get on with it and live life and adjust ourselves accordingly? I wasn't going to give up and throw in the towel or anything like that. Okay, go with the hand you're dealt.
Well, what a great attitude to have towards it as well. Now, you lead the Lethbridge Myeloma Support Group. Can you share what a typical meeting might look like?
Have you ever seen a wrestling match? No, it's catch as catch can. We do a little bit of everything. There's no formal meeting because meetings get bogged down in red tape and all sorts of stuff. We sit around in a group when we can be outside because that's the best place to be. In the fact that myeloma, you're immunocompromised, so you don't want to pick up diseases from other people. In the winter months, yeah, Zoom is the preference, but we'll go to Timmy's and sit around and have coffees and things like that. But we'll go down to Henderson Park and sit around and share stories. The thing is, it's just being able to mix and mingle with people who share the same disease, and we all talk about how we react differently to the same drug. Because, as I said, it's a designer disease. We all react differently to the same drug that we're given. The side effects affect us differently.
Now, this doesn't look like it affected you based on the way you responded to being diagnosed, but is it common for depression to set in, and what advice can you offer to help prevent this from happening?
Oh, yeah. I'm an old broadcaster, so I've got almost 40 years of faking it till I make it, okay? I can get behind the microphone and sound like I'm on top of the world, but behind and underneath, it's a completely different story. It's like a duck in the water. But, you know, any life-changing thing like diagnosis like that, it's bound to change your psyche. I admit every now and then I have a little pity party, but you've got to keep a positive outlook. Absolutely. Surround yourself with positive people. You know, read positive things, listen to positive music. Don't go on the internet. Oh, the internet, it's the bane of people with diseases because you get so much misinformation out there. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But the disease hasn't robbed me of my sense of humor. Maybe you haven't caught on to that, but Monty Python's, you know, always keep on the sunny side of life.
Life
You've ever
with
seen
Brian.
the video for that? Yeah.
And any final thoughts on winning the battle against myeloma, and any final thoughts in general? You were talking about misinformation.
Yeah. I always say to anybody I talk to, if you're going to go on the internet, go to Myeloma Canada's website, myeloma.ca. That's where you're going to find the most current information about myeloma. It's been rebranded and refreshed, and it's got the most current information, research, pamphlets, YouTube videos. It's just chock full of things. It has contact information. We have over 45 support group network groups across Canada. So whether you're in Sydney, Nova Scotia, or out in Tofino, BC, or up north, you're going to find groups in your province that you know, you can connect with, whether it be virtually on Zoom or, you know, in person, and get a hold of them. And any of the leaders will be happy to get a hold of you and talk to you on your level about where you are in your journey with myeloma, because they've been where you are.
Brian Treadwell is the leader of the Lethbridge Myeloma Support Group. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.